Lauren Chiren is a menopause expert and coach all the way from the United Kingdom who will be on our show right now. In fact, in the next 5 minutes. And
Welcome, Lauren, for coming to our show. We're very honored to have you on our 100th episode. Yee! Let's bring out the champagne. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Very happy to have you. Thank you.
Amazing. Delighted to be here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. So, as we all know, menopause, which happens to be your niche, is something that happens to women naturally. And also for cancer survivors like us who have experienced this, could be said to be a side effect of our chemo treatments. Now, as someone who is not a medic, but who is very well versed in the menopause niche, do you have a backstory to this? Could you tell us something about why you have decided to carve a niche for yourself in this regard?
Yeah, it was very much an accidental niche carving. It was not something that was deliberate at all. I think, like many people, you have a life experience and then you want to use that life experience to make sure that other people have a better time of it when they get through that time of life, whatever that happens to be. So I was a senior exec in financial services and a sole parent of a child with lifelong medical needs. And in my early 40s, I was managing global projects and programs in regulatory and compliance change space. So had teams in India, America, UK, different places. And I loved my job. I love the complexity, the intellectual stimulation. I love the people. I love my teams. And then I noticed that there were a number of occasions where my confidence had taken a hit. I'd be sitting in a meeting, my throat would be really tight with anxiety, and I would struggle to say the smallest of sentences. So I would have to sip hot water to be able to squeak out even one word. Or other meetings where I'd hold on to the arms of the chair and I'd watch the clock tick down, waiting for the meeting to finish because my heart was beating out of my chest and I thought I'd fall on the floor if I let go of the arms of the chair. And many other things were happening, like looking at someone's face, knowing them, knowing their partner's name, their children's name, the job they did, when I hired them, but not being able to remember their name. And there was about 18 months where I didn't sleep at all, like an hour and a half maximum on any given night. And I got quite hyperactive. So I was training really hard. I was pushing myself, working harder and longer instead of shorter and smarter. And I got to the point where eventually I decided to leave my job because I thought I had early onset dementia. And it was 3 appointments in to see my doctor that I discovered it was just menopause. And I had hit some really dark spaces during that time, and I just wanted to make sure that nobody ever went through what I went through, and no other employer would be so ignorant about menopause and not recognize this was what was going on with a member of staff and know how to offer them support. So I started bringing people together, and that was the beginning of Women of a Certain Stage.
Fabulous. And I love the name, Women of a Certain Stage, because
Mm.
this is a stage of life that is unavoidable and we really have to go through. And I like the part that you are basing your interest and advocacy in the workplace, because I'm sure you are not the only one that could have faced these kind of
Mhm.
early symptoms and uncomfortable situations while at work. Something else, you have spoken about the symptoms that you had, but on 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 the whole, what are the symptoms that women should look out for? Because I was told that sometimes, they vary depending on who's being hit with it.
And different studies are indicating different levels of symptoms. So initially, we started talking about between 30 and 40 symptoms, and some of them are physical, physiological, emotional, cognitive, urogenitory, and we can be hit in lots of different ways. And I think it helps better to understand why we have these symptoms. And if we think about the three key hormones that are impacted when we go through menopause, primarily estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they have massive impact on how we think, how we feel, how we behave, our bone health, heart health, brain health. So when they're in our kind of regular cycle as we're going through our menstrual life, we kind of know what to expect day in, day out on a month-to-month basis. We know the days that we feel really up and gregarious and outgoing, our energies are high, our focus is great, and other days where we're a bit quieter, a bit more reflective, we might want to be having some more downtime, maybe a duvet day. And we're used to that because we're used to those fluctuations. But as we come into perimenopause and those levels are beginning to decrease and fluctuate, and they're not in sync the way they have been for the last 30 odd years, we can be suddenly finding that all our body systems are being impacted, and some people will be affected in some ways and some in others. So it could be sleeplessness. That's a very common symptom right across the world. And that's often one that's overlooked because often people have had children and they're used to having disturbed sleep because of other people's patterns of sleep in the house. But sleep is a really big issue with menopause for
Mhm.
many, many people. Night sweats, hot flushes, headaches, joint pain, bloatedness, vaginal dryness, vaginal atrophy, dry eyes, itchy ears, tinnitus, sore boobs, all sorts of different things that people can experience. And we know also that when you look across the different cultures around the world, different lifestyles, different socioeconomic backgrounds, people's patterns of menopause symptoms are different. And we are still missing so much
Mhm.
research. So there's a lot still to be learned. There's a lot still
Mhm.
to be understood
Mhm.
about familial impacts and lifestyle impacts and cultural impacts. But yeah, a lot of the common symptoms are the joint pain, the hot flushes, the loss of libido, the loss of confidence and self-esteem, and sleeplessness.
Yes, and also I wanted to find out with people going through, I mean, not people, women going through this, what, from your angle, what menopause interventions would you suggest for them?
Yeah.
Like, you were talking about cultures and everything. In certain cultures, things like these, like menopause are not discussed. They're hidden, they're swept under the carpet. A lady cannot have a conversation with her husband or members of the family even about, the changes that she sees and feels that she's going through. But what, from your perspective, could you put across to that lady that would be watching saying, okay, I'm going through these symptoms and experiences and situations. What how can I, kind of support myself? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think the first thing you said people and then you said women. Well, actually, you were right when you said people because some of our transgender and non-binary and gender questioning people will experience menopause as well. So when I
Yeah.
say women, I'm referring to specific studies or research that's on women, but generally I will say people because that is more
Yes.
inclusive as well. So
Yes.
if someone's experiencing symptoms of menopause, then often, the first thing I would say to somebody is to start to keep a symptoms list because you want to have your own awareness at a really good level. So keep a symptoms list, make a note of what the symptoms are, make a note of how badly they're impacting you, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very much, 10 being really impacting me, or a smiley face, a neutral face, a sad face, any way that you find it easy to keep a list of your symptoms or use an app. And then once you've done that for 2 or 3, 4 weeks, you can really look at those symptoms and hone in on whether there are specific things that are happening in your life, stressful situations, foods that you're eating, exercise that you are or are not taking that are exacerbating your symptoms. So it gives you some really good insights to what's going on with your body. Then you can start to think about how are these symptoms affecting my life? How are they affecting my home life, my intimate life, my work life, my interaction with my children or my friends? And think about in each of those situations, what would be really helpful for you to be able to navigate that? And then you can start to think about when I'm talking to my partner, when I'm talking to my children or my workplace, what are the conversations I need to have? How much do I want to share? What do I want to ask them to do to accommodate this so that my behavior changing isn't going to have a negative impact on them, but actually it will bring us together and help us work together? And that'll be a
Mhm.
different thing for a different group of people. But equally, it's so important to go to your doctor and to speak to your doctor, explain what the symptoms are, explain that you want to talk to him about perimenopause or menopause, and make sure that you get him or her to talk to you about that topic. Because so often people are dismissed, they're told to just get on with it, they're given antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication because the doctors are going down a different treatment pathway and they're asking different questions. So you want to encourage the doctors in their questioning to ask questions about menopause so they can come to the right solution for you. So there's a number of medications on the market, there's a number of treatment pathways that the doctors can prescribe, but equally important is to consider your lifestyle. So making sure you're well hydrated, that you've got great quality foods, the best foods that you can afford to buy, both from a fat, from a protein, from a carbohydrate point of view. And all of these things are really important. We don't want to be eliminating or missing any nutrients in our diet when we're going through menopause. We want to move our bodies, we want to get active. So find the thing that lights you up. What did you do as a kid that you haven't done for years that puts a smile on your face, and get out there and
Mhm.
do it. Do more of it. Make sure that you're interacting with other human beings as well, other healthy adults, because we can catastrophize when we are ill or when we're going through menopause or both. And we start to believe the stories we're telling ourselves in our brains. And the more we believe, the more paranoid, the more withdrawn we can become. And if we're not interacting with other adults, we can find ourselves quite isolated, and that can exacerbate all of our symptoms. So lots of these things are worth considering. And I always say, do one at a time. It's just too overwhelming to try and, increase your hydration and your nutrition and your social life and everything all at one time. Choose one thing at a time, accomplish that, and then move on to the next thing. And just bit by bit, you'll find out which are the things that work best for you.
Yes, absolutely. And during the course of my journey, I met a lot of young cancer patients, who were in the infusion room with me. And these were children of about, I would say children, maybe 15, 16, 17, who have started their periods. And of course, their periods stopped because of this, the AYAs. What advice would you give to them or their caregivers as regards early menopause? Hitting them during this stage of their lives, especially when they haven't had children, they haven't maybe started relationships and stuff like that. How would you, I would like you to address the caregiver now, because I'm sure the caregiver would be in a situation where they wouldn't know what advice to give their ward. So what would you tell them, and how would they put this across to their wards?
I think that, this is where the medical team, the caregiver, and the patient all have to come together. This is a team effort, and you're definitely stronger together. So I do think that it's really vital that there is really great communication going on across everybody. From a medical point of view, clearly your medical team are going to be focused on dealing with the cancer, for treating the cancer. And this is often an issue when it comes to the post-treatment phase, where someone is potentially in remission, or they're now out back in the world leading their life again, and they don't know what menopause is. They don't know that they've been put into chemical menopause or a medical menopause, and that is very, very problematic as well. So we have
Yes.
to be having these conversations with anybody that is having any treatment that can cause someone to go into an early menopause, because it's not a natural process whereby you've got all these years of gradual, slow hormone decline, which can be problematic in itself. But when you go into what we call a cliff edge or a sudden menopause, that is very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly for the teens and for young people in their 20s, they started the menstrual cycle. And as you know, estrogen is absolutely critical for so many of our body functions. And we know that when you're on anything that suppresses your estrogen, is going to have an impact on your bone health, your heart health, and your brain health. So we need to be looking at everything that is available to us to be able to manage that from a lifestyle point of view. And so all the things I just mentioned before about hydration, nutrition, movement, and really good support, having a really good team of people around you to support you is vital. I have a I have a young man who's just transferred from children's hospital to adults hospital in the renal department. So different topic, but what they've done there is they've created a young persons unit. So from 18 to 25, they have a complete team just for that age group. So they bring the youngsters together. So they've got
Mm-hmm.
that self-help and support, and
A
they don't feel
pair support,
peer
pair,
support.
yeah.
So important. And I think for the caregivers, for them to access everything and anything that's available, or to even set up these type of informal groups so that they can be brought together, is so fundamental, because you're
Yes.
already feeling isolated. You're already feeling like you're not fitting in with your peer group. So for the caregivers, for me, it's all about lifestyle. It's about making sure that you are using your voice to advocate for your young person, to get all the information you can possibly get, and to be asking the question about menopause as well, because that has, at that age, I mean, I went through an early menopause, but I was 37. So my body had developed. And yes, there are ongoing consequences as a result of that. But when you're 15, 17, 18, 23, 20, that's a whole different ballgame. So we need to be mindful of the developmental impacts, physically, emotionally, cognitively. We need to be thinking about urogenitory symptoms as well, and being able to access good ongoing support, and making sure that people understand that these are normal conversations that you're entitled to have, and that you have every right to be using your voice and accessing those conversations. So the caregiver and the patient and the medical team and any other support services absolutely have to be coming together and making sure that they're all doing everything they can to support the patient.
Absolutely. And something that hit me when you said you had perimenopause at 37. Would you mind telling me what triggered that?
I became menopausal at 37, so I probably skipped the whole perimenopausal piece. So very much like someone going through cancer, someone that goes through a medical or surgical menopause. I was pregnant, I had my son, and I went straight into menopause at 37 as soon as I
Oh,
had him.
wow.
So we don't know. It could be that it was very stressful. We know there's an impact between cortisol and adrenaline and how your body works. So maybe that shut down
Mm-hmm.
my system. We probably will never know. All I
Mm-hmm.
know is I became menopausal at 37, and that's obviously got me really interested in when you have premature ovarian insufficiency. When you have that early premature menopause, then that you have to take that more seriously, because especially if you can't take estrogen, if you've got an estrogen dependent cancer, then you've got to start thinking about the lifestyle factors as well.
How can one now start preparing for menopause?
Oh, just
It just caught you unawares at such a young age. You didn't, nothing prepared you for that change, as it was sudden. But now that you know and you're putting that information across, what is it that you would like that lady to know, or that man to know about
yeah,
menopause, and how to kind of, what should I say, best prepare for it when
yeah.
the time comes?
So knowledge is power, right? I mean, this is one of the wonderful things that you're doing with your podcast and your other work. It's just about having that knowledge, because that knowledge gives you the opportunity to decide what to do. So one of the things I've done is I've set up a Menopause the Basics course, which is free, and we've taken about 200,000 people through that over the last 10 years. And that's about condensing everything I learn and sharing that with as many people as possible. For the first day, we look at ages, stages, symptoms, definitions, so that we actually understand the language of menopause, understand what an early menopause, a premature menopause, what the implications are. What are the symptoms? What are the range of symptoms? What other conditions might you be experiencing that might mask or look like menopause? On the second day, we look at the 7 steps of successfully navigating menopause. And that's what we talked about before: the mindset, hydration, nutrition, movement, rest and relaxation, asking for help and support, boundaries, good social interactions. And how do you do that to support someone going through it? And how do you do it for yourself? And then the third day is, why are we talking about menopause at work? Why are we talking about it now? And what can we do in the workplace to make sure that we're supporting our people going through menopause, so that they don't end up going through something like I did, or they don't have a
Hmm.
manager that kind of feels a bit icky about talking to their colleague about menopause? How do we empower those
Hmm.
people? And actually, around the world, we look at what legislation or regulations are there that we can, talk to employers about, that give cover to people going through menopause. So, the Americans with Disability Act in the States, or the Equality Act in the UK. So we can start to look at how we use existing regs and legislation to be able to give people cover, to encourage employers to start to take more proactive action in this space as well. So I think it's about empowerment and knowledge. It's about applying that and understanding what you can do. And it's about making sure we have outlets and places where we can talk about menopause safely, comfortably. I work with a lot of different populations here in the UK. And for example, in the Somali community, exactly what you said before, it's not talked about. People didn't want to be seen to be coming to the centre to talk about menopause. So we ended up, after about 6 months, eventually holding our first menopause social meeting. And people were actually initially talking about, oh, I'm going to my friend's house this afternoon. And they would all gather at a friend's house and leave the children in one house and then come to the centre to learn about menopause, because they didn't want their husbands to know about it. So it's about being creative. It's about thinking about different things and different ways of reaching different communities, so that we can raise that knowledge and bring people together so they don't feel isolated and alone. Because I think that's for me, definitely, that was the very worst thing, was just feeling like I didn't know what was going on, thinking it was early onset dementia, getting into a very dark space, and then finding out it was just menopause and I can do something about that.
That is such fabulous work, Lauren. Thank you for all that you do, especially in the workplace, because sometimes, I've read and I've heard and I've listened to people speak about their experiences with their bosses. It's like, the same thing with menstruation. A lot of us have had, when I was growing up, I had crazy periods, you
Mm,
understand. But as I grew, got older, they lessened. And then when I started taking cancer treatments, they disappeared. Everything
mm,
disappeared at the same time, so to speak. I didn't have those pains, and then everything kind of fizzled out. But in some cases, you find out that the workplace can be very toxic,
mm,
especially as you said, a lot of bosses seeing you behave like that would, take it to be something else, not really understanding why these kind of things are happening to women, and supporting them also, because now they're like, in my community here, there are men that are now coming out to say, we didn't understand what our wives were going through, but now that we do know. So they're going
Mhm.
to all these kind of hubs in the borough, in the different boroughs here in New York, and being, allies for their
Mhm.
wives, of their wives and
Yeah.
spouses and partners,
Mhm.
to support them, to say, listen, we used to be very, we used to think you were just, blabbing or just being over dramatic, but now we know what you were going through. So
Mhm.
for what you're doing, for the workplace and all that, when you have reached out to these employers or these workplaces, I suppose you kind of consult for them or something. Pardon me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
What are their, what's their feedback? Because I talk about the men here. What is their feedback for the workplace
Well,
support?
yeah, I mean, at the time of recording this, I've just come back from New York and New Jersey, so we did some sessions with my clients over there. We've worked with over 400 FTSE and Fortune 350 companies now. So the reaction is usually just one of, oh, that relief. It's like, oh, thank you. I get men saying, "I think you've saved my marriage." I get women saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I'm not losing the plot," or "I'm so glad that I don't know, I'm so glad that I'm not alone." And it's that sense of relief of realizing that
Yes.
this is a natural, normal stage for most people. And if someone has gone through an earlier menopause through treatment for cancer, or they've had an oophorectomy or hysterectomy, or they've maybe had treatment for endometriosis that's put them in a menopause-like state, there's so many reasons why people end up in menopause. So when we talk about it and we normalize it, and it's just another thing, it's highly predictable. We're going to go through it.
Hmm.
We're going to get there one way or another.
Hmm.
So often organizations are, from the people that attend sessions or go through training, line management training, trained to become menopause coaches or menopause champions, they are just looking to up level the conversation and the knowledge, make sure that we're looking at the entire colleague journey from job design and person spec through recruitment and onboarding right the way through the entire colleague journey, and make sure every stage is menopause savvy and menopause supportive. And we look at things like, employee assistance programs and private medical care, make sure that the providers are actually trained and are great providers to support people. And it's not just like a one-off conversation where there's no outcome at the end of it. So there's lots of different things that we do with employers. And usually, the kind of the upside of this is increased engagement, higher productivity, better performance. And for some employers who will use the fact that they do menopause awareness training and are menopause savvy and supportive, they will say that actually helps them attract talent into their organization as well. So there's so many wins for
Do
everybody.
they have KPIs? I also wanted to bring up the subject about more women are retiring much, much later, and are finding maybe a second, third chance at life and their careers in their mid 50s or
Mhm.
so. Um, with ageism, with menopause, how are you asking? I don't know if you mentioned that, or I didn't get that. Asking, um, employers to kind of give them a chance, because when you reach that threshold, that age, um, it plays a lot in kind of, separating the wheat from the chaff, saying, oh, okay, would rather take someone who is in their 30s and that can work another 20 years before the onset of menopause, rather than take a lady who is already in menopause, but who has the experience and who could do, very well in her new dispensation. So what would you say to that, to those employers, as to how to give that menopausal woman a chance at life
Yeah.
again?
I actually have a very different conversation with employers. And when I'm working with the companies that I work with, typically, first thing we do is look at their strategy. And usually their strategy, especially if we're looking at 2025, 2026, we know that they're looking to increase the percentage of women in leadership positions. And we know that women in leadership positions are going to be perimenopausal or menopausal, usually.
Yes.
So we know automatically that they are looking towards supporting their female leaders. And I love that, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the number one objective is to have 25, 30, 40, 50% female
Mm-hmm.
in their senior leadership team or on their boards. So it's a win-win. And then we also know that most companies now are post-COVID are very focused on their diversity and inclusion statistics. And again, if they want to be hitting the metrics there, they need to have the right number of women. And we know that women over 50 are the fastest growing economically active group in the States and in the US and generally and around the UK. So we're using our voice, like you said, we're working longer and later into life. We are taking those opportunities. We're not waiting for them to be offered to them. So, and then the third thing is that companies post-COVID are being much more proactive in their health and well-being. So again, that plays into the wider piece. The reason my business is women of a certain stage is because primarily I went through menopause at 37 and I didn't want it to be women of a certain age because I don't want to be put in that bracket. But now we
Yes.
look at people who are menstruating, having fertility challenges, maybe having pregnancies or not, and then coming through perimenopause. So women of a certain stage is helping employers look at everything from menstruation to menopause and helping them understand that the workplace is designed by men for men. And actually, we need to rethink the built environment. We need to rethink everything about the strategy of the workplace. So we start
Yes.
helping employers become much more creative so that they are genuinely more supportive and savvy of the needs of someone who has a menstrual cycle, who will potentially have a baby and who will go through perimenopause and menopause. So it's that big strategic piece that we help employers look at because we are so valuable and we are rich in skills, knowledge, and experience. So I can't even begin to see an argument why they wouldn't snap us up and make sure that we've got great representation in their organization.
Absolutely. That's very well said, which is true. We're gems in every society, in every organization. So we can't just be swept under the carpet, So that's wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Lauren, for coming on to really, really share your expertise. We're going to have to bring you again once again in the future to actually come tell us more about your strategy in trying to empower women to become menopause coaches by using your own talent. So thank you once again for being here and for supporting us as well. And I'll reach out to you again to come on board where we're going to strategize on that topic, being a menopause coach. Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Lauren.
much.
And
Thank
have a
you.
beautiful day. I had a wonderful conversation with you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you so
God,
much.
God bless you.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.